Hi, and welcome to H3 TV. Thanks so much for taking a little bit of time over your lunch break to join us as we share ideas on health, hope, and happiness. H3 Cultures is about bringing that health, hope, and happiness first personally, but then to the workplace. And every week I have the pleasure of having a different guest that either chooses to speak about health, about hope, or about happiness. And today I have the pleasure of having Jim Johnson with me, and we're going to share tips, stories, and ideas on hope. So thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you will enjoy this episode 10 to be with you. So Jim, welcome to our H3 TV show, and tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do? Who are you, Jim?
Thanks, Andy. I appreciate having you on your show. And who am I? I've been married for 39 years and have one son. So we'll start with the family piece first. Professionally, I was a longtime high school basketball coach and teacher. And hope is a big part of my life because I was fortunate to be part of a story that gave a lot of people hope. And I'm going to share a little bit about that story. And I've got a couple of other stories about to try to hope and inspire the audience watching today. So, but I was a longtime coach. I retired. And because of the story that I'll share a little bit about later on, I actually got into professional speaking. So I do a lot of inspirational leadership keynotes. I was doing those around the country until this thing called COVID hit. And then, so I've done some virtual, although I was slow to pivot there. And then I actually have a book I wrote about the story called A Coach in a Miracle. And I'm working on a second book because one of my missions right now is to help young and emerging leaders. So I'm writing a book with a college professor to focus in on helping young and emerging leaders.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I love that you speak about hope. I love that you've written about hope. I love that you know the desperate need for hope in our world, right? Like people need something to look forward to and something good. So, what are like 3 to 5 of your strategies? How do you stay hopeful, Jim?
I think it starts with I'm really trying to guard my mind, and I think that's something which sometimes we're not cognizant. And I'm very aware. In fact, one of the things I challenge people a lot is: do you have your own personal growth plan? Are you really intentional about what do you feed your mind? And like I'm really anal. My goal is to feed my mind for at least 70 minutes every day, and that's through reading, listening to educational, inspirational programs, whether it's podcasts or YouTube videos, or all different ways. And I've always turned my car into a library on wheels. I'm always listening to audio programs. So I think it starts with the fact that you really got to be cognizant and being intentional about what you feed your mind. Secondly, I think it's really important that you're aware of what people are you surrounding yourself. As I challenge people, I worked with basketball players in high school for a long time. Used to say, are the people you're associating, are they helping you or hindering you? So I think that's a really important thing, is to be awareness. I know because I think there is some real translation between hope and health. So I think it's really important that you take care of yourself. If you feel good about yourself physically, I think that helps you mentally. And then having a mental program to help you. Like for me, I pray every day, and I also do meditation every day. So those are some of the things that I do to try to create hope for me every day.
I love that. Those are great ideas, Jim. Thank you. I am huge. We align very well on all of these. I am very, very intentional. And I just had like an hour conversation with someone last night about protecting my mind, protecting my eyes, my ears, and that people don't realize how much it affects them. And you said 70 minutes. So I really love that. You kind of have a designated time. But people think, oh, I don't have time, Jim. I don't have time. But if we looked at their time and saw when they were sitting down watching some of the reality TV or watching the news or listening to the negative or getting on Facebook and feeding into a negative story and wasting the time on that. I love that you're intentional, protecting my mind. That's just a powerful line. I want all the listeners to think about that. Are you protecting your mind? Because I think it's easy without being intentional to let things slip into our sight and into our ears and into our eyes that that are not feeding us,
Right.
that are hindering us. I love that you coach these players. I think we're all influencers. You had a really intentional role as a coach to influence young people. and now you're continuing to do it with your writing, but thinking about who we hang out with and who we allow to speak into us. I was speaking with another man this week, and he said, I don't have friends that lift me up.
Mm.
Friends that are always like where we harass each other, but I'm kind of worn down. I can't take it. So I love you talked about your tribe, talked about who are those people you're hanging out with. And, sometimes friends and family, we have to have boundaries around them because they're not the healthiest people. We have to decide who is not hindering me, who is lifting me up. So I love that. Health
Yeah.
is so important. We got to take care of ourselves, what we put in good and bad, and then prayer and meditation. I feel like we are very aligned there, Jim. I love that. But we also know people are busy and they do feel overwhelmed and they go, good for you, Jim. I bet you have more time than me. So when you're challenged, because we're all challenged, listeners, we all have our challenges, no matter how much we motivate you and inspire you. What do you do when life is hard? Because there's hard stuff and there's a lot of hard stuff for people right now. What do you do when life is challenging? How do you remember to stay hopeful if you don't have time to do this and that tragedy comes in or a struggle?
Well, I think you got a great point because we all, could claim that we're the busiest person on earth and we don't have time and all that. But, if you really look at it, reality is we all have 24 hours each day. And, if you're sleeping 7 or 8, so you're down to about 16 hours, let's say 16 or 17 hours. And so going back to that word I used, intentional, like I'll be the first one. I'm not as busy as I once was. At one time, I was, had a father of a child with a wife, teaching full time, coaching full time, and also speaking on the side. So, I understand what busy plate is. And so it goes back to with that word intentional. One of the things I share strategies when I talk to people is that you need to make appointments with yourself. Like we talked briefly, I know it's more about hope today, but I think health and hope are related because if you take care of yourself, for example, like I work out every day. And for me, it's a little bit different. In fact, I've read studies that was interesting that, they did a study where they said if you work out at the same time every day, or the other group was they worked out where they had the flexibility to work out different times. They found the group that was flexible actually worked out more often, which it was interesting because that's something I've done for a long time. Like I like to work out in the morning, but sometimes I have something going on in the morning. So I plan, maybe I work out at 1 o'clock in the afternoon or at 5 o'clock after I finish my day. But it's so important to me that I'm intentional. The other thing that I call it the 2-for-1. I gave an illustration. You're driving. Well, instead of listening to a news show that could be negative, I'm listening to some inspirational educational program while I'm doing it. So I call that the 2-for-1. The other thing, since COVID hit, I knew I had to get outside more. So I do a walk every day. When I walk, I listen to a podcast. Mm-hmm. So there are ways that you can really be more effective with your time. But I think you have to be intentional. You have to find out, because I do understand, many people are extremely busy. And you know what? I know that pain. I was in that. So I understand. But when I was telling you, I was as busy as probably anybody. I still worked out every day. I still fed my mind every day. And there's some things built in, like, for example, when I get up in the morning, the first thing I do is read for 15 minutes. So, that just starts the day for me on a positive note because I'm putting something that's good into my mind. So I think really looking at how you schedule things and how you use your time, you can find more time than you think you can.
Yeah, you can find more time than you think. Most people always say that. I get 36 hours. That's how I get everything done. And especially my heart always goes out to single moms with multiple kids and multiple jobs and trying to do all that. But there is time. And whether we take 5 minutes or we take an hour, there is time to take care of ourselves. I think you're double winning, Jim, when you are taking a walk and listening to something positive. I always love during the winter in our old home, I used to go on the treadmill and listen to Joyce Meyers to start my day. And I was like, I've got movement, I've got my physical and my spiritual body fed. And so I'm ready for the day. But crises do happen, Jim, right? Like, that we do get bad news sometimes. Maybe there's a family member that's sick. Maybe something throws off our day and that time is taken from us and we lose a loved one. Let's just say we lose a loved one. We just lost my father-in-law. And for 4 days I spent with my mother-in-law afterwards. And it was like, my whole schedule got off and I had to write, okay, I'm canceling this meeting. I'm moving here. So when those hard things come, and I know my listeners A lot of them have been through a lot, whether it was a job loss or a sick or whatever. How do you, when that dark cloud is over you, how do you stay hopeful? So I love that you have this routine and you do these great things. But when that dark cloud is there, when life does get heavy, how do you mentally get out from it, not let it overcome you? How do you do that?
Well, I think there's a few strategies I use. One is the fact that uh, one of the things, and my wife always gets mad at me because I'm pretty good at this, but I really learned after losing control, especially when we lost a game. Obviously, that's not as tragic as some of the things that people have gone through in the last couple of years, but it still affected me. But I really got to the point where a strategy is that I can't lose control on the things I can't control. Like I can't control the pandemic. I can't control whether it rains or not. So therefore, I've gotten very good at trying to really focus on being exceptional in the things I can control and not focus so much on things I can't control. Certainly tragic, like you lose a loved one to a death or that type of thing. I mean, those are really difficult. Don't get me wrong. And to me, Annie, that comes back to your values. Like is your family very a big value for some people? Most people would say it is, but not a lot of people by their actions really show that it is. I admire you. I'm very sorry to hear a loss in your family, but the fact that your value was that you were going to take time to help that. And that comes to a really important word, which I believe is so important with talking to people, and that's empathy, trying to really get an understanding of where they're coming from. And one of the things that I think changed my coaching career for the much better is when I became a better listener. When I started coaching, I was one of these guys that thought I knew everything and, I had all the answers. And I realized that that was not true. And as much as I kept growing as a person, I still never knew all the answers. And when I realized that I could be so much more effective as a leader when I would get consistent feedback from my players, from my coaching staff, that just made me a much better coach. And lead me to my last thought is that, I know it's starting to get out there, but understand that, mental and physical health issues are out there, and don't be afraid to ask for help. It might be starting by talking to a family member. It might be talking to a therapist of some type. So I think it's really important that you're not afraid to ask for help when things aren't going well, because for the most part, I think people want to help you and support you.
Yeah.
But if they don't know, they can't support you, right?
That's right. And partially, Jim, that's why I do these. Partially what got in my mind is that people needed help right now. They need help with their hope, with their health, and with their happiness. And what if we could offer this talk show every Wednesday and they could tune in for lunch? And no matter what they're walking through, no matter how struggled they are, we could pour into them. But I'm such a believer, and we can't do it alone. And ask for help and seek positive. I want to respond to a couple of things. I love that you said you learned as a coach to listen. And I think what you also learned when you learned to listen was you learned to be humble, right? And to not know it all and to be open to learning and getting feedback from peers, getting feedback from players, whatever it was. And I think humility allows us to listen to others and then to say, how can I best respond or help or support them? I also love the serenity prayer. God, give me the wisdom to know the difference, the serenity to accept the things I can't, or the courage to change the things I can, the wisdom to know the difference. I love that because I think really what you're talking about is life's going to get hard. You're going to have bad days and good days like all the rest of us, but you ask yourself, can I change this? Can I control this? And that doesn't mean you don't get to be sad if it's hard. But if you can't control or change it, I was working with some unemployed people. I was doing a presentation for people in transition. And I was like, make a list of what you can control. We can never control if people pick us. As speakers, we both know I deal with way more rejection than yeses. But then I just got to go, okay, what can I do? Can I give something? Can I send something? Can I do something to show my value or to reach out to someone new? So I love that. I want to tell you, you and I would never coach together, Jim, and here's why. It's the only job I got fired from. and I was fired by my husband, and it was a volunteer position because I love ties. I love ties. And my husband would say, honey, nobody likes you. I'm like, oh no, people like me. He's, no, nobody likes you, because I didn't want anyone to win because someone else would get their feelings hurt. He's like, please stop coaching, please. I wasn't about the win. I was about the tie. So I just wanted to say that we were probably not coached together. Now, people are like, I'm like, I just want everyone to be happy. In fact, my oldest son, 33 this week, sent me a picture of a t-shirt. It said, I just want everybody to be happy and have fun. Let's play hard. He's like, oh, that is something you would say. So what do you think about hope? Is it a choice? Does hope happen by chance? Does it happen by circumstance? What do you think, Jim? How do we get to hope?
I think part of it is that, because in the fact of like being optimistic, I think that is a mindset. Okay. So the thought process, that I'm going to look at things through an optimistic viewpoint, I think is a choice from that. I do believe hope is also a choice, but the thing where I see there's a little bit difference is I think to give yourself hope, you have to develop strategies and take action. All right. And otherwise, it turns into things like it becomes more to me a wish as opposed to, if you really have hope, then you're going to think about, all right, what are the things, again, going back to my control, that I can now take action, whether it's to hire a coach, or whether it's, I need to get in better shape, or, the list could go on and on. But the bottom line is, okay, if, you don't hope your way to lose 20 pounds, now you can start with a goal and say, by December 31st, I'm going to weigh, say you weighed 170 and now you want to weigh 150, you put that out, you're really strategic. But then after that, there's some steps you got to do consistently, or that hope's not going to stay there. So I think that's the one thing that I would say is, for me, I'm pretty optimistic. But to keep hope alive, I think you really got to develop some ideas, some strategies, and then to take action on those and figure out, are they working or are they not working? And if they're not working, we got to make some changes.
That's great. I love that. I am a coach myself. I do some executive coaching, but I have a coach. Jane Atkinson is my money and mindset coach. And I think Darren Hardy's one of the people I listened to, and yesterday he said, it's great that people want to sit home and I believe I'm going to be thin and wealthy and whatever, and they have this vision. But if you don't take action, exactly like you said, Jim, we got to take action, right? We got to take the steps. It's great to have vision and ideas, but you got to put people to work. And as a coach, that, there is steps. When we're speaking to people, we're not just speaking to inspire, motivate. We're speaking that hopefully they walk out the door and take some of what we're teaching and apply it to their life so they can get the results they want, right? So Absolutely. They can have more hope and be more intentional. So I love that. Very good. Very important. All right. What's the difference between being hopeful and optimistic? You kind of mentioned optimism already. So what do you think the difference is between optimism and hope?
Well, to me, I just think that optimism is more of a mindset. You decide, or I'm an optimist or I'm a pessimist, and you know what? And I think there's some value to both. I think it's certainly, I'm more of an optimist, and I think for the most part people that, but I know some people that are pretty successful that are pessimistic, and because they do think of maybe the worst case scenario, and then how do they avoid it? So there is a strategy there, but I would say overall, I am more optimistic, and I encourage people to be more optimistic. But again, I know I'm being a little bit redundant, but I think hope is something where you really got to develop some strategies and consistently do the work to make that hope becomes a reality. Because as I mentioned before, I think if you say, well, I wish I would weigh, 150 pounds when you're 170, that's probably not going to get it done. You mentioned Darren Hardy, and I'm a big, I listen to Darren's little thing every day, and Jim Rohn was his mentor. I'm a Jim Rohn addict. I've listened to him more of his programs, and I think possibly good. I could repeat his words word for word. But I think that's where, again, feeding your mind with the right things consistently. But then once you get good ideas, you got to implement those ideas, and that's where we run into trouble.
Yeah, I like that. My husband's more of a realist, so he would say, I'm not a pessimist, I'm a realist. And I would say I'm an optimist. And just in the last couple of years, I've really noticed, because I'm so optimistic and I'm also a high expectation of myself and other people, I get let down often. I feel like always I'm not living up to, or people aren't living up to, or things don't play out. And so I'm working on kind of moving not to be just an optimist, because I love being an optimist, but being a little realistic, because I always think everything's going to turn out happily ever after. And obviously it doesn't always turn out. And not everybody else has that same desire. Now, I would love to meet those pessimists that are successful, because I'm curious, how do they, because you have, to me, I feel like, especially as an entrepreneur, we have to be optimistic. We have to think, oh, of course they're going to pick me. Of course they're going to love me. Of course,
Right.
even if we know, well, maybe not everybody will, but we have to show up with that confidence and idea. So we put ourselves out there and keep saying, hey, maybe for this conference or this one. So I like that. Is there anything that slips into your life, Jim, that does steal your hope, that takes it from you? Is there anything that you're like, you know what, this really can get me like moving out of my optimistic attitude and my good intentional schedule, and starts to steal your hope? Is there anything you struggle
Well, I think, there's certainly, because I'm a human like everybody else. So, certainly the pandemic was because, number one, I didn't understand it at first, and then I didn't think any way it would last as long as it has. So and I've admitted to people that I love speaking. I love trying to make a difference. As I mentioned, I'm working on a book, but I was very slow to pivot to virtual presentations, and I'd be the first to admit it, because I loved speaking, yet I didn't want to do that. I like being in front of people and meeting them in person, but the reality was that wasn't going to happen, and that definitely hurt my business for a while, because I didn't make that pivot. So I think we can learn from my mistake that you got to be willing to make those pivot. And there's always going to be things that are going to jolt you in the wrong way. I was a coach for a long time. We had some really tough situations. Like, we lost in the state championship one year, and we overcame a lot. We lost our second best player halfway through the season, and that took me a while to recover. In fact, it was very helpful to the team, because on the outside I was being optimistic, but on the inside I was like, I cannot believe this happened. I pray every day, how can God let this happen to me? So I think those are things that you think about. But I think it really goes back to being grounded and going back to some of your philosophy and your values. And, when something hits you hard, that you got to take some time to reflect and say, okay, you said the serenity prayer. I think there's a real power. In fact, it's one of the things that is, as I mentioned, my wife is a little bit more pessimistic than I am, and she's been repeating the serenity prayer way more these days. So.
Yes, maybe she's a little more realistic, and maybe we need those spouses that are realistic, because it's all going to be happy. And even, yes, definitely the pandemic. I was flipping channels last night, and I don't even know for sure. I think it's America's Got Talent was on, and there was a group. It just gave me chills, and it gave me hope and chills. There was a group of nurses out of New York City. So Jim is from New York. There was a group of nurses singing together, and I think their song was "We've Got You," and it was just, oh my gosh, I'm flipping and I see this, and it just gave me chills. And I thought, here's these people that are exhausted and serving, and not only serving in the hospital, but using their voices to sing to us and to remind us why they are nurses and that they're here to serve. And so it just touched me deeply and brought me back to hope in the midst of this struggle that has affected so many people personally and professionally and physically and emotionally and financially, that there are beautiful things coming out too. So I'm always looking for those.
Annie, one thing I'll add too is that we forget sometimes when things go bad and negative, is that, what, one of the things I remember Jim Valvano, if you remember that SB speech, and one of the things he said that really hit me between the eyes is you got to laugh every day. And I know sometimes when I am down, I have a few comedians that I love that I would just YouTube and just watch a few minutes just to make me laugh. And I think that's something we forget sometimes, that power of laughter is something you need every day.
It is the best. I always say movement is my medicine, but I also say laughter is the best medicine, right?
Yeah.
And we need to laugh. So I love that. And I love to laugh and be inspired. So tell me about your hope for the future. Are you hopeful about your career? Are you hopeful about the world? What are you hopeful about? Tell me some stuff that you are looking forward to, believing in, knowing will be good in our future.
Well, I'm excited. I think things are going to come back. So I think I'm going to actually be able to do some traveling again and speaking. So I am optimistic about that. And hopefully I'll meet Annie in person sometime. I actually know a decent amount of speakers out of Minnesota. So hopefully one day that'll happen. Secondly, I'm excited in some of the things that I'm doing. As I mentioned, I'm working on a book. One of my real pushes right now is I really want to help young and emerging leaders. We actually started a tri-generational podcast where we have a young man that's 22 that's our podcast host, and then the professor that I'm working on the book with, she's in her 40s, and I'm a little bit older than both of them. But so in the same concept, we're trying to help young and emerging leaders on our podcast. So we're excited about that. From a health standpoint, I've actually picked up, I was a basketball coach for 35 years, but I actually become an avid tennis player later in life, which has given me a new jolt of energy, trying a new sport later in life. And it's been a lot of fun. So, for the listeners, don't be afraid to try something new and, get involved because, you need to have some fun every day. And I mentioned laughter, and I think fun is another thing. If you're not enjoying what you're doing, at least some of the day, it makes life tough. And life is a challenge as it is, for sure.
So you got to find some fun. We're getting ready to move to Florida in a couple months here, and pickleball is very big there. And
yeah.
My son, who was the captain of the tennis team, says, "Mom, pickleball is old people tennis." And then I talked to a woman this week, and she said, "I'm a senior pickleball player, and there's 20-year-olds that play." And I was like, "All right, I don't know anything. I'm not judging. I'm not that athletic, so I will try to figure out pickleball and tennis when I get to Florida." So, Jim, do you have a story to tell us? Anything else about hope? You kind of implied earlier you have a beautiful hope story, so please feel free to share us. Leave us with that on our lunch hour chat. What's a great story?
Sure. Well, I was very blessed. If we have time, I've got another short story I'll share too. But for one, I mean, the blessing I had is, and I'll give you a very quick background and share this story because it did inspire a lot of people, and it still touches my heart and soul very deeply. I had a young man back in 2006 that had been our team manager for 3 years. He's on the autism spectrum and he's learning disabled. His name is Jason McElwain. The world knows him now as J-Mac. And he had a dream, Annie, that was so powerful because he tried out for the team 3 consecutive years. And I was a head coach for 30 years. And I never had a player, if they didn't make the team 2 times, would ever try out a 3rd time. But so he just touched my heart and soul. And the fact that he wanted to serve as the manager. So his senior year, I told him that I was going to give him a gift. And the gift was I was going to put him in for our final home game, which we call senior night, where we honor all the seniors and we bring their parents and guardians out. And I remember I gave him a jersey, number 52, was way too big. It didn't fit well. But there was a rumor going around school that he slept in it for 2 straight nights. I mean, this kid was so excited. And so with just over 4 minutes to go in the game, I thought the time was right. And my dream was I wanted to get him in to score a basket. I thought if he could score a basket, that would be something he'd cherish the rest of his life. Well, he gets in, the place goes crazy. And I'm usually a pretty macho guy. I usually don't cry at basketball games. But what Jason and I didn't know, when Jason entered the game, our student body, we had a good following. If you YouTube the ESPN J-Mac story, it's a very powerful 5-minute video, but we had a good student body following, and but what Jason and I didn't know, one of our parents put these paint sticks with these placards of Jason's face. And when Jason walked on the floor, the student body gave him a standing ovation and they showed these placards. Well, Mr. Macho turned into Mr. Soft because I sat down and tears just started rolling down my face. I just was so touched at how they responded. And then so he gets in the game. The first time he gets the ball, our team passes him the ball. He shoots a 3-pointer in the right corner. People kind of stand up in anticipation. It misses by like 6 feet. And I kid people that I know you're not supposed to pray in the public schools, but I was praying Dear God, please help him get one basket. But a great lesson for all of us on that was the fact that one of the things we really talked to our players, what we call next play, because basketball is a fast moving game. And a lot of people, I challenge people when I do my presentation about it, is like, how many times the first time we try something, we failed to the point where Jason shot an air ball. That's pretty embarrassing. Yet he just responded, just moved on. And so the next shot, he missed about a 10-footer, but it hit the rim this time. So I thought to myself, God's starting to listen. We're getting closer. And then the third possession, he shoots a three-pointer from the right wing. This time, magic. It goes in. The place just explodes. And I'm thinking to myself, God must be a basketball fan. Not only has Jason scored, he's got a three-pointer. Can't get any better than this. Well, the next 3 minutes, Jason turned into his boyhood idol, the late, great Kobe Bryant, and he started making shot after shot. And I do want to fast forward very quickly. 4 months after the game, Jason was up for an ESPY for the greatest sports moment of the year. And who was one of his other finalists? Kobe Bryant, his idol. Kobe had scored 81 points in an NBA game that year. So he was competing with Jason for the ESPY, and Jason beat him out. So going back to finish the story, Jason starts making shots like there's no tomorrow. And in fact, he ends the game. The two things I'll never forget, with about a minute to go, I get a tap on my shoulder. I'm still crying my ass. I look behind me. It's Jason's mother, and she's bawling her eyes out. And she gives me a big hug and whispers in my ear, Coach, this is the best gift you could ever given him. And of course, I cried harder. I was so touched. And then how the game ends it. Our opponent that night, I want to give kudos to their coach and the players, Spencerport High School. They score, and our player takes it out. Normally throws it to our point guard, but this time he throws it to J-Mac, and J-Mac's dribbling down the court. I'm thinking he's just going to go in and just make a short shot and the game will end. He stops from like 2 feet behind the NBA three. I'm thinking, Jason, don't shoot from there. He launches this rainbow, swish. I look over, the student body runs on the floor. Our players run on the floor. And I'm thinking, I'm living the movie Rudy, but this is really true. Then they put Jason up on his shoulders. He got the game ball over his head. At this point, I have no idea how many points he scores. And the public address announcer comes on and says, Jason, J-Mac McElwain is the leading scorer for the Trojans tonight with 20 points. Oh. And I kid people, if he'd have played the whole game, if you go by that math, he would have scored 160 points for the game, which would. And actually, the ironic thing, you talk about the hope thing. At that point in my career, I'd been a fairly successful coach, but we had never won what we call our Section 5 championship, which is a pretty big deal in our area. And we went on and won it in front of a sold-out arena, about 11,000 people 3 weeks later for the first time. And then Jason and I, we were very close then. He actually came back and became a volunteer assistant for me my last 9 years. And do you have time for one other short little inspiration?
Sure, go ahead. Our listeners love these inspirational, great stories.
Well,
and certainly when we share this, feel free to share the link to the YouTube video or tag J-Mac and tell him we're still talking about him and celebrating him. So
I will do. So Jason and I coached together. We actually together after winning that first one, we ended up winning 6 of them in total. So we got in a real roll. And but our second to last year was the best team we ever had, and we lost in the state championship. And we had a very good player on that team that ended up going to the University of Vermont. His name was Anthony Lamb. But Anthony, in basketball terminology, was what they call in-between size. He was a great player at our level in the high school level, but he was only 6'6". And to play at a high Division I level and even the NBA, usually you either got to be bigger than that or you play guard. Well, he was a forward in high school. So he goes to Vermont with still the dream he wants to play in the NBA, and he has a great career. He ends up being the conference player of the year 2 years in a row. He thinks he's got a chance to get drafted, but he doesn't. So he actually has to go to the G League. He gets cut in an NBA camp by the Pistons. But this was so amazing because Anthony was one of those young men. He just had a desire that you can't teach. He was that no matter what kid. So he goes to the G League, and he's actually not playing much in the G League. And for people that are not familiar, that are watching the show, the G League is the minor league for the NBA. So if you can't play much in the G League, you're not going to play in the NBA. Well, with about 6 games to go, because they had a bridge G League last year. They did it in Orlando like they did in the NBA when they brought the NBA back. And they only had 20 games. He gets traded with 6 games to go to the Houston Rockets G League team, and they liked him. So they put him in, and he played all the time. He ended up having a great 6 games. And after that, the Houston Rockets signed him for the rest of the season. And I got the privilege to go to Houston and see him play in 2 NBA games. So it was, so I just think, with a lot of the issues of hope right now, those 2 stories, that they keep me going. That if you just stay with it and keep it, I can't guarantee you'll play in the NBA or score 20 points in 4 minutes, but I know one thing: you can do more than you think you can.
That's right. You can do more than you think you can. I love those both great inspirational stories. My big takeaway, Jim, is you said he was only 6'6". And for someone who's barely 5'2" on a good day, fun size, as we like to say, I think 6'6" is pretty good. That's amazing. I wish him continued success as well. Feel free to tag him. Also, we love to celebrate these people that are driven and doing the work, taking the action, being strategic, protecting their body, staying hopeful, and spreading that hope and inspiration to other people. Because first, yes, we want to be hopeful, but then the whole point is to serve and spread to others. So Jim, I'm sure people have loved your stories, love listening to you today. So can you tell us, if they want to get a hold of you, where's a great place to connect? Is it social media? Is it your website? Tell us a little bit about that.
So probably the website would be best. It's coachjimjohnson.com. That way I wouldn't forget it. And on that, you can follow it. I'm in social media. I do a thought every, like a success thought every morning that I post on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook and Instagram usually. And then I usually do a leadership thought, because leadership is something, and working with teams is what I did for a long time. And it's something I still study immensely, because I just love figuring out how to be a better leader and how to put together, high level teams, whether it's business or athletics or whatever. And so we do it. We have a free monthly newsletter. We have a weekly blog that we do. I have a YouTube channel where we go through a lot of different inspirational things. And certainly if I can ever help anyone in the audience with a presentation, I do virtual and in person, which I'm hoping is going to come back. It's starting a little bit, but
it's coming back. It's coming back. It's actually, as soon as we get done with this, I am hitting the road to go present at a conference tomorrow morning. I believe it's coming back. I am staying hopeful for myself and all my speaker friends. It's going to come back. Well, thanks so much, Jim, for being with us today. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in on H3 TV, episode 10. We will be back next Wednesday to continue to inspire you and to spread health, hope, and happiness. We all need more of that. Take care and make it a great week.
Thank you, Annie. That was great. So I enjoyed